Hello and good evening, everyone. My name's Danny Ferrier, and I was supposed to be here with you live tonight and unfortunately have caught the flu. So I apologize profusely for not being able to be there and interact with you, but I thought that maybe sending this little video would help you to hear the message anyway, and I'd really love to hear your feedback at a later date. So tonight I want to talk to you all about the leadership principles that I've been developing within myself, and also share with you ways that you can effectively communicate with the people around you and showing up as the community leaders that you are. So can everyone wave their hands if they can see me? Just really love, even though I'm on a video, just to get a bit of interaction from you. Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. I do really appreciate it. And I just want to acknowledge all of you for being in the Rotary Club, for taking your time and effort to give back to our communities. And that's really what leadership is all about. It's evolving to the point where it's time to give back, really, isn't it? Who can agree that now that you have the time and you really want to give back to others, Rotary is a beautiful platform for you to be able to do that. That's awesome. The other thing about the leadership principles that I really want to highlight is that it helps you to connect with the community in a way that they are going to be most receptive to. So imagine as you're going out doing the projects that you set your hearts on, that you will be able to communicate in a way that helps them to receive the message and helps to get the community on board with whatever the project is that you have. And even just from a one-to-one interaction, understanding more about how you can show up as the leader within yourself, and that's going to really make a big difference in the way that those projects run. So, talking about the benefits of what leadership brings, and the number one is communication. We all have different communication styles, and we all grew up in such different environments that it's important to remember that we don't always know the best way. And understanding that when we are starting to develop ourselves, and we continually are developing ourselves, that it's actually really great to always keep on learning. And I know that lots of you, or all of you, will know some of these principles, but is it okay just for tonight that we put our explorer hats on and we start to explore leadership and maybe look at it in a different way? Or maybe there's something that comes out in this evening's presentation that will just resonate with you and that you can start to implement in your lives, maybe even with your families and just in the interactions day to day that you have going on. So can I get a thumbs up that everyone is excited to hear leadership principles? And even if you've heard it before, you're going to engage anyway, because maybe there'll be one little nugget that you hear that might change the way that you are showing up. Beautiful. So when I talk about leadership, the first thing that comes to my mind is when I was a Rotary Exchange student. I remember somebody saying to me, "You are now representing New Zealand." And that was a really important moment for me because I knew that I needed to represent my country well. I knew that the reputation that I had in my little town in Argentina was going to teach those people what all New Zealanders are like. And not actually, but we know that when we have one reference, we assume that everyone else is like that. Now, I'm a bit of a fire rocket, so everyone in my little town thinks that New Zealanders are 100 miles an hour. So actually, for me, it was about connecting with the people and teaching them about our culture and explaining to them how we do life in New Zealand and showing up as the leader for the very first time, representing something that is so important to me, New Zealand. And if you contrast showing up as the leader, showing up as the best version of yourself, the best representative that you can be, you contrast that with having the mindset of, I already know it all, or just thinking that, oh, I've done this before, that it actually doesn't help us to move forward in our communication with people, because energetically, we're telling them that we don't care. Energetically, if we show up with the mindset of we know everything, instead of we want to learn and be the best leader possible, then we're going to get some resistance. Who can appreciate that? That when we have that attitude, we're not going to get anywhere. I'm sure loads of you know that. And so this evening, I'm going to take you through 3 steps on how you can actually change your communication and be that leader that you need to be in order to represent Rotary, represent your families, and to represent yourself. Beautiful. So there's a quote that I wanted to share with you, and I love this quote because it's so true. We are either green and growing or ripe and rotting. And we are continuously growing. We're never going to get there. There is no there. But the journey, the process, continuously learning is what's going to help keep us inspired. It's what's going to help keep us passionate. And that's going to help connect us with the people around us in our communities. So the first step that I would like to share with you is in regards to questions. And I call this step leading with questions. And I think questions are easily overlooked. When we have an idea and we go somewhere and we say, we want to do blah, blah, blah. If we show up with the energy of, I need to achieve X, then the person on the other end is going to be defensive. Psychologically, you're invading them. It's sort of like the communication waterfall, This is what I want. And the water is just gushing down on their heads. Does everyone see that? Whereas a conversation needs to be a two-way street. And I'm sure this is really basic for a lot of you, but it's a gentle reminder that leading with questions is always the most powerful way to get anything done. And the reason why it's so important to lead with questions is because we really want to clarify our mind and the person that we're talking to's mind. That didn't really make sense. We want to align our thinking with the thinking of the other person. It's easy to assume that the other person thinks the same way that we do. But actually, because we did grow up in different environments, because we do have different parents, we actually don't see the world in the same way. And that was probably the biggest learning in Argentina. I lived in 3 different host family houses, and every single family had a different way of doing things and a different way of being. So when we're leading with questions, we're humble enough, first of all, to recognize that our way is not the only way. And secondly, we are calibrating where the other person is at. So for example, the sausage sizzle that we do for Red Cross. Instead of saying, okay, well, the sausage sizzle happens every year, let's just do it like we do every year. Going in with questions. Okay, so what would we like to get out of the sausage sizzle this year? What would everybody like to see happen that maybe hasn't happened before? These kind of questions are going to really help us to engage the people around us, to bring people on board, and to meet them where they're at. Even asking the question, okay, who was involved in the sausage sizzle last year? Then you've got an idea. You're not just assuming that everybody knows, not just assuming that that person is going to have the same thinking as you. And it might be a really logical idea, but it doesn't mean that we can come across with the energy of I know. It needs to be an energy of curiosity. And curiosity is what keeps us young. Curiosity is just the juice for our heart to keep us exploring. And curiosity is really about saying, I don't know everything, and I would love to know what you think. And that's being a leader. Because as a leader, we don't need to know everything. We don't need to have all the answers. We need to bring everyone on board and collaborate. And all of those answers are going to bring us even greater success. So who's loving what I'm talking about so far? I wonder what you're taking away from that maybe you already knew, but it was something that you needed to be reminded of. I find that asking questions changed my life because I now consider the other person's opinion first, and then bring in my ideas, and then start to have a two-way conversation around how something should work. And curiosity is the key to that. Now, the second leadership principle is communicating with clarity. It is so easy to think that we've communicated something once and that should be enough. Who here knows that they've fallen into that trap of saying, but I told you? So easy to fall into that trap. Or imagine, I'm sure a lot of you have wives at home, I told you that. But actually, it's our responsibility to make sure that that person has understood. And there's a formula that I find super useful, and it is that if we say something 10 times in 10 different ways, then the person will take in 10% of that information. How awesome is that? It's a great formula because it reminds us that until we're sick of saying it, that person probably hasn't understood. And especially depending on how much we know them. Maybe if it's your partner, you can say it a few times and they'd get it. But really knowing that they've understood is our responsibility. So when we're communicating with clarity, it's not only articulating ourselves well, but it's saying it over and over again in many different ways so that we can communicate our point and be understood. So when we are doing that and we are communicating as much as we can, we are taking ourselves, our ego out of it. We are allowing ourselves to say, okay, I needed to communicate more. I needed to set up the communication. What I really loved, for example, was Charles giving me a ring on a Monday and just saying, hey, I'm just checking in with you. Is everything going okay? Have you got everything set up? And I did have everything set up, but of course I can't be there with you. And that was so important for me because it made me feel like they cared, that you cared, and that you are onto it, and that we are creating a great communication loop so that if I did have any troubles, I would feel as if I could come to you and ask. So how's that going to change the way that you communicate with your partner now? How is that message going to change the way that you talk to your children? Because I know it's easy to say, I told you already. But really, do we need to have that attitude? Because the leader in us is the leader that says, okay, I didn't say it as many times as I could have, and I vow to be better. And when you're showing up with that attitude, people actually end up hearing the message, funnily enough. But when we show up with the attitude of, I've already told you, then there's defensiveness. And then there's a conversation around whose fault it was, instead of actually what you're supposed to be talking about. Can you resonate with that when there's just a moment where you're talking about the problem of the thing instead of the thing itself? So that effective communication comes from consistency, doing it as often as possible, and of course, articulating it how you mean it. Sometimes it's really easy to veer away from what you feel or just not say something as it is because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And New Zealanders are really good at sweeping things under the rug. I know a few examples myself. Who knows somebody that's really good at sweeping something under the rug? Definitely a common thread because we don't want to hurt each other's feelings. And that's great from one sense. But the other sense is that we actually need to say what needs to be said as a leader. Because otherwise, people are not getting the feedback that they need. Otherwise, we don't feel understood. And saying what needs to be said is the best trait of a leader. Because that's the way that we're going to get things done. And a leader is all about bringing someone to a common vision. And bringing when we're doing projects in Rotary and we're bringing everyone on board, we all do have a common vision. And when we can say it like it needs to be said, with love and compassion and in a conscious way, that's really going to help everybody get on board so that we can get the project done. So I hope you're loving this message, and I hope that this is a moment when you can think, yeah, actually, there could be another way. There's always another way, and our way isn't always the right way. So the third principle I want to talk about today is empathy. Empathy is a really beautiful trait. And the massive benefits of empathy is that you are able to meet people where they're at and bring them up to another level. Because sometimes people just need to be heard. They need to have that space held for them so that they can feel understood. And I see empathy as sort of trying on a jumper. You know when you get a big woolly jumper and you put it on over your head and it just fits all snugly and lovely? That is empathy. So when someone comes to you and maybe their response is less than ideal, or when somebody in the community comes at you with an energy that you're not appreciating, instead of being defensive to that person, maybe just stop and try on the jumper. Put it over your head and think, what was this person's day like? What might they be going through that's causing them to react like this? And when we're able to meet someone with that empathy, when we're able to say, hey, I don't understand what you're going through, but I'm here to tell you that it's okay, people just melt. And when we're leading teams or organizations, or even in the Rotary Club itself, it's really easy to have lots of small, I want to say drama, but not drama, just little small things that go on. And when we can just bring empathy to that situation and try it on like that jumper, then we can actually start modeling that for the people around us. And we make ourselves happier because we stop stressing about the small stuff and start bringing love and empathy to those situations. And maybe that person doesn't know, or maybe that person just had a really horrible day. And it's easy to dismiss that. But being the leader means that we start to make better decisions. And when we start to make better decisions, we can show up in a way that's going to really support the people around us. And when we support the people around us, we realize that life was never actually about us. Life is actually about giving back and being the person that you need to be for others. And that means taking responsibility for our communication. So I trust that this message has been really valuable. I trust that going home, you'll be able to try on empathy. You'll be able to have that clearer communication. You'll be able to lead with questions instead of the attitude of knowing. And I'm sure some of you do this so well already. And well done to you, because it is the secret sauce of life. And being the leader that you truly knew that you could be means those soft skills that are hard, that we have to learn and develop. So thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate being here, and I'd love to join you next week. And my name is Danny Ferrier. I'm a leadership coach in Nelson, and I would love to connect with any of you, have a coffee, have some chats, and talk about life. Bye for now.